So we're going to talk about the different some of the concepts that Goffman talked about in chapter 2 of our reading. And then I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So the first one is based on the preparation or the presentation of the self. And so keep in mind that when we talk about all this, it's all based on social interaction. And so kind of what I've gathered from the reading is that when it talks about the self in this context, it's basically the way we present ourselves during social interactions, and that is based on the reaction we aspire to achieve from other people or a person. So I'm going to act or interact in a certain way to get a reaction out of the people I am coaching or I'm around or a person. I want them to kind of get something out of what I'm saying, in a sense. And then I think in this one it's important that as a coaches it's genuine. And then the chapter kind of talked about how it's not really about getting through the interaction without like messing up. It's kind of about honoring the role and honoring the others, the people that you're around. Because if you don't, then it kind of comes off disingenuine. And then failure to kind of honor those two things will cause a stigma. And then this is kind of evident in sports coaching because obviously, like as coaches, we want to get our athletes to react a certain way. And then sometimes if ourselves as coaches don't believe kind of in what we're saying and there's little holes, then sometimes our athletes, kind of the older they get, they pick up on it and they realize that hey, this really isn't genuine or what they're saying isn't true. And then the stigma kind of comes along. And so stigma, what I gathered is that it's something negative. So it's disqualified from social acceptance. So there's kind of a little hole in what you're saying or doing, and it's not a good thing. So it's basically kind of the impression of yourself. How do we want others to act? So how do I act in a way to appeal to like the good of the group or like what's the majority? And then the first thing I kind of thought of, which doesn't really have anything to do with coaching, or I guess it kind of does, depending on what age you coach, is like middle schoolers. A lot of times they change their true identity or personal identity to kind of fit in with their surroundings. So their personal identity kind of hides, and then their social identity, which is based on they react based on what they want their peers to see or what they think their peers want to see. That kind of takes over. And then kind of going deeper into the stigma, there's kind of a virtual identity versus an actual identity. So virtual identity is based on like first appearances and assumptions versus the actual identity, which is has experience that prove that person's true identity. So, and then when those two don't line up, so when the person thinks this is what I'm doing versus what they're actually doing, then that's when that stigma occurs. And then I think you see stigmas a lot, especially in younger ages. So I coached the 13 team this year, and then, like I said, I kind of see it more with girls, is that they act how they think I want them to act. And then since they're not being genuine towards themselves, it kind of causes that stigma or that kind of disingenuine act. And then, like I said, the stigma, I think, is more of like an act. So it's like covering up something. It's kind of like spin rolling or like kind of snowballing from that presentation of self when they're not honoring themselves and honoring others and honoring the role and honoring others. So yeah, like I said, it's a negative thing. And then after that stigma occurs, then we kind of get into impression management, which is basically, like I just said, it's kind of snowballs. So once the person realizes that there's something that's disingenuine about them that's being exposed, they kind of have to manage it. So, oh shoot, like maybe I'm not being genuine, now I have to cover it up. And so basically it's strategies around the control of the stigma since the stigma was revealed. So it's just kind of, like I said, snowballing. It's covering up that stigma. I kind of think of it as like when you get caught in a lie, you kind of have to keep lying to kind of stick with it. And so I would see this more in coaching. Like I said, if you were a coach and you kind of say you were running an offense that you knew would work for the team, but then you didn't really believe in it. And so there's little faults where your players kind of pick up on it, and you just kind of have to keep covering it up in order to get your players to believe that you believe it. And then it just kind of spirals into this big mess where it's not really genuine. Your players can pick up on it. And as coaches, we don't want that. And then I also think that you could see this a lot in younger athletes. Like I said, when they are not being true to themselves and they're trying to act as if they're trying to act how they think their peers are acting or how they should act in that social situation, it just isn't good. It creates a lot of self-conscious players. And then as coaches, we could keep an eye out for those kind of players who maybe are covering up those stigmas with impression management. And then the last one, it's kind of that dramaturgical perspective. And I found an article online, and it's called Dilemmas Maintaining Face and Paranoia in Average Coaching Life. And so this article kind of talks about kind of the face that coaches have to kind of keep on. And then this is also the example in the book that it talked about, and it talks about kind of the face that coaches have. So as a coach, you want to give a certain performance to get your athletes to believe in you or believe in the system, or you kind of want to inspire them. And then you hope that interaction dictates future interactions. And then also what kind of jumped out at me in the chapter with this dramaturgical perspective is that the dramatic signs. So it's kind of like you're putting emphasis on certain things that you want your audience to kind of get out of. So points that are difficult to see. So maybe if you're talking to your athletes, you're going to point out something specific without actually pointing it out. So putting more emphasis on something so that your athletes are able to understand that and take that forward. There's also with that, there's the front region and the back region. The front region kind of is everything's happening in the front. It's like kind of the performance. And then the back region is kind of where underlying maybe stigmas are there, and then you're not necessarily trained in that. But the chapter also said that you can never really kind of sleep on the back region, like don't sleep on the back region, because people could still be performing kind of in a performance there. And then it's all kind of based on fit your actions to the understanding. So this is all kind of based on the social interactions you want your athletes to get out of what you're saying as a coach. And then as long as you're genuine and you believe in what you're saying, then you can avoid kind of that stigma and snowballing effects, which leads to impression management, and then everyone just kind of not being on the same page. So, yeah. All right, bye.